overcoming because Elohim prevails in our lives. There is no prosperity as it is replaced by judgment and rejection. So there's the vine, there's the fig tree. There is no fertility of the mind, learning, knowledge, wisdom, and understanding. There's the pomegranate, because this dries up. There is no blessing as there is no righteousness. There goes the palm tree. There is no spirit to breathe instruction and inspiration into our lives. Good decisions are, this is the apple, and then good decisions are lacking because the wisdom, advice, and right rulings of cultivated minds have also dried up. And these are the balance of the trees of the field. If we are established simply in the red clay, then we're simply an empty vessel. We don't take in anything. Yoel is very clear in telling us what happens when we think outside the boundaries, when we are exiled from the Garden of Eden. We think outside the boundaries of what Yahweh Elohim intended, when we change or dumb down his word, and when we allow our relationship with him to become lax. Our bowl becomes empty, or the fruit that it contains becomes rotten and inedible. There's a lot, and maybe this is just an opinion, but there's a lot of inedible, rotten fruit out there. So consider what Paul said that we should try to cultivate in order to keep our bowls filled with good fruit. And this is that dreaded Galatians that everybody steers away from. But he says, but the fruit of the Ruach is love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, trustworthiness, gentleness, and self-control. Against these there is no other instruction. It says, against these there is no law. And it also, against these there is no Torah, which basically means there is no instruction. There is no other instruction, as the only instruction that we need to cultivate these comes from the word of Yahuwah Elohim, and is communicated to us by and through Mashiach and the Ruach of Yahuwah Elohim. What does the Torah teach us? It says to love Yahuwah Elohim with all of our heart, with all of our soul, with all of our strength, and to love our neighbor as ourselves. And Yahshua said, on these two hinge or hang the prophets and the writings. Everything depends on these two things. Within the Torah, we learn exactly how to love Yahuwah Elohim. We learn how to love our neighbors as ourselves. So everything that we need is there in the Word. But if the joy and the gladness are gone because the bowl is empty, Paul says that the following are present. And this we read in Galatians 5:19 through 21 that says, and the works of the flesh, there's that clay bowl, are well known, which are adultery, prostitution, uncleanliness, and indecency. What do these mean? Adultery and prostitution go hand in hand. It's not that, marital adultery and going after foreign deities is the same thing. Not building a relationship with Elohim or abandoning Yahuwah Elohim in the relationship is the same thing. Paying in to a different type of worship is the same thing. This is spiritual prostitution. Paying into something else. Or, what am I trying to say here? Or going along with something because you don't want to look foolish. It's the same thing. Uncleanliness. Well, that's kind of self-explanatory. If you don't know the difference between clean and unclean, it really doesn't make a difference. You go after the unclean, you're good. Indecency. Idolatry, the same thing as adultery and prostitution. Sorcery, hatred, quarrels, jealousy, fits of rage, selfish ambition, dissensions, and factions. All of these can be grouped under sorcery. You know, we think of sorcery as abracadabra, pull the rabbit out of the hat, cast a spell on your neighbor's cat, but sorcery, witchcraft, is manipulating someone else to do what you want them to do. That is a sorcery. It's manipulating someone. And if you say manipulating someone, then you can see how hatred, quarrels, jealousy, fits of rage, selfish ambitions, dissension, and factions, you can see how all of these fit into sorcery. But there's also envy, murders, which kind of go together. You don't have to physically kill someone to murder them. You hurt someone's feelings, you've murdered them. I make teshuvah daily when I drive down the street. But it's true. Murder, envy, drunkenness, wild parties. Literally would say orgies, but wild parties sounded better. And the like of which I forewarn you, even as I said before, that those who practice such, these shall not inherit the kingdom of Elohim. Well, that's kind of, that's kind of a given, because we read in Revelation 22:15, well, 22:14 says that inside the city are those who practice righteousness and keep the commandments of Elohim. They have access to the tree of life. But outside the city are the dogs, from a word that means male temple prostitutes, the sorcerers, the murderers. All of this stuff is outside the garden. And it's going to run its course and it's going to cease to exist. Because that's it. The screw will only screw in so far in helical time. Time doesn't matter inside the garden. Time outside the garden will cease, will come to an end. If you're not being fruitful and multiplying, that means that you're not procreating either. And this is what happens outside the garden. It just comes to an end. So it's something to consider. Considering what we've looked at in this verse from Yoel and the comments made by Paul, we can now go to our closet during this Omer count and very seriously consider what our vessel contains. So I'm going to quote the Hebrew of 2 Timothy 2:15 so that we can use it as a measuring tool to gauge where we are and where we need to go. And I'm going to take a little bit of liberty of expounding on this verse a little bit. But it says, live your life to show yourself approved to Yahuwah Elohim as a worker in the garden and in the field that needs not be ashamed, as you are rightly discerning and applying the word of truth to your existence. So, the final question to ask is, will the Master hold the door open for you? And that is our look at this verse of Joel. All of these verses are giving us little pieces of individual information that teach us, hey, this is what separates you from a relationship with Elohim. And once we get past these verses here in the first chapter of Joel, we're going to see that if we don't get our life together and correct these things, then there's a very, very unpleasant army that's going to come in that second chapter. And we're going to see what it does to our lives if we don't get our situation, our relationship worked out. But with that, we can say that grooviness has been achieved. And I'll take the doohickey off and we will